Welcome everyone. My name is Isabella Di Santiago, and I am the Graduate Pipeline Coordinator for the Office for Graduate Diversity. Thank you all for joining us for this session on navigating the housing search. We understand that housing is a key consideration as you think about your admission. Today's session is geared toward walking you through housing options available, navigating off-campus housing, tips on how to find space that works for you, as well as other factors. Live captioning and ASL interpretation is available, and this session is being recorded. Recordings will be shared after editing to ensure accessibility. As questions come up for you, please put them in the Q&A. Next slide. It may not be possible for us to address all of your questions, but you can always reach out to the Office for Graduate Diversity at grad.diversity@berkeley.edu or meet with a Diversity and Community Fellow. And with that, now I will pass it over to Emily Raceborough, our Graduate Student Basic Needs Housing Specialist, to lead this discussion.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. We can go to the next slide. We're going to talk about navigating the housing search today. We're going to run through a few different types of housing. So first, we're going to talk about housing that's available on campus. So both the single student campus housing and family campus housing. We're going to run through a few options for some like alternative housing options. And then the bulk of our time is going to be spent talking about off-campus housing, the local neighborhoods, things like that, how to secure housing, and what your options look like. Like I said, we're going to start with campus housing. So I will pass it to Michelle D'Souza Moore and Clayton Sullivan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are from the UC Berkeley Housing Office. My name is Michelle D'Souza Moore. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I am the manager for graduate and family student housing. Clayton, you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Clayton Sullivan. I use the he, him, his pronouns, and I'm the systems and assignments manager for graduate and family housing. So all the background stuff. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Debbie.
Hi, my name is Debbie Cohen, and I am the single student graduate housing coordinator. And I'll pass it over to Alda.
Hi, I'm Alda Regana de Guzman, and I am the family housing coordinator.
Awesome. So as Emily mentioned, we have housing options for both our single graduate students and then also our students who are coming with families, right? And what that makeup family looks like. And so whether it's you're married or domestic partnership, if you come with dependents, whether that is children or adult dependents. And then we also, little sneak peek preview, we are starting a pilot program for this coming year in the UVA West Village for couples. So those folks that are in a relationship but have not formalized it through marriage or a domestic partnership. So we'll kick off with letting you know a little bit about the housing options for single student apartments. You can just click on over. So graduate apartments, right? Why live on campus? So convenience and community, all right? It's close to downtown. You're surrounded by campus life, lots of good eateries around. It's close to campus. Affordability. So UC Berkeley's graduate housing offers an affordable option with rates that cover some utilities, Wi-Fi, furnishings. We do have unfurnished units as well. And so definitely bringing down those extra expenses that you may get when you're living off campus. We have a low deposit, so $500 deposit, no credit checks, no co-signers are required for living on. Your billing is going to be pretty straightforward. It goes right into your CalCentral account. So no writing out checks and getting them to those landlords. And then, it's just, we really help with that kind of nice, smooth move-in process. And then it's just a simplified independent living, right? So these graduate spaces are geared towards students, like-minded students, right? Folks, your peers that are going through the same things that you're going through in terms of needing, a good study space, needing to have opportunities to, build community. So there's lots of different things that you can do with living on campus and close to campus. Next slide. Ooh, awesome. Okay, so we have 4 areas and 4 single graduate students. So our first is an intersection, which is located in Emeryville. It's about 3 miles from campus. Some of the amenities that you see there is in-unit laundry. They're fully furnished. They are single occupancy rooms, which means that you have your own bedroom. So even if you are in a shared space where you may have apartment mates, your room is just yours, and you're sharing the shared spaces like living room and kitchen and bathroom. As you can see, some units have a balcony, access to an off-campus meal plan as well. So you can get that through UC Berkeley Dining. And a priority for folks here are for optometry students. And then the room type or kind of makeup of the units available at this space are 1 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 4 bedroom units. And then our next is Jackson House, which is, thank you. No worries. Jackson House, close to campus. It's about a block from campus. Fully furnished apartments. We have units ranging from a 2-bedroom to a 6-bedroom. So you can be living with 1 other person up to 5 other people. But again, you're in a single bedroom. And although there isn't in-unit laundry, you do have access to laundry room in the building. And again, ability to get an off-campus housing meal plan in any of these spaces. And we do have some priority for different fellowships for this particular space. Next slide. Huchin Ruai. This is our brand new building that we just opened this year in Albany. It's right across actually the way from our family housing units. And it is, you have unit laundry. It's fully furnished. We have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms here. State-of-the-art fitness center, access to really delicious restaurants and Sprouts grocery store right across the street. There is a shuttle, like a bus line right outside the building that can take you to campus pretty quickly. And our priority for this particular building are folks in the Rosser College of Natural Resources. And then our last one is Manville. Again, super close to campus in downtown Berkeley. It is prioritized for our law students, our first year JDs. And these are studio apartments. So you're not in a shared space. This is you on your own. And we have both furnished and unfurnished spaces here. And same thing, laundry access in the building, just not in the unit. And that was my super quick spiel about our SSA spaces. And Clayton, you want to talk about family housing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. So family housing is located in Albany, California. So right next to Huchin Ruai, very close to, it's right on the bus line, the same bus line that serves for Huchin Ruai and runs straight up to campus, which is nice. So family housing, it is family focused and community supported. So there's an entire, we have at University Village, we have, which are called senior community directors. So kind of like an RA or an RD, so to speak, who host events throughout the upcoming weeks and upcoming months that are focused, very community themed. So I believe tonight they have, there's a like a Black History dinner, which will be really nice, as well as they have a couple other events coming up this weekend. But they're always trying to build that community, which is really nice. It's very much close to it's in the Albany School District, the Ocean View School District, excuse me, one of the best elementary schools in the Bay Area, which is wonderful. So very much a close walk from University Village over to the elementary schools. But also we also have a community center and as well as a recreational center as well, like a gym. There's also a childcare option there. It's connected. It's the Early Childhood Education Program, the ECEP, and it works with UC Berkeley, and it's to help with the raising the little spares about showing those different education points. So I'll do the next slide. So University Village, we have two different parts. It's 974 apartments we have down there in Albany. It's broken up into two separate areas, East Village and West Village. It's very affordable. It's one nice thing about University Village. It's month to month, so it's not like a set contract. It doesn't run for 12, 15, 18 months. So as long as you give us that like 30 days notice, you can cancel at any time, which is wonderful. And as I mentioned, it's also right on the transit line, but it's also very close to, say, San Francisco, as well as to, say, like if you're wanting to go to Oakland or like you can go up to Sacramento. It's right on the 8580 line. I pass it every day on my way home. It's wonderful to see. We have study centers there. We have two separate study centers as well as a library and a what do you call it? Like a computer lab, so to speak, as well. There's a community garden as well as I mentioned, that like family resource center, rec center, which is kind of much like a community center. So recently we had somebody who had like a baby shower there. So that was kind of nice that they were able to bring their whole family there and not just host them in their apartment, but also like take advantage of that community center and use that, which was wonderful. Do the next slide. All right, so who's eligible? So for family housing is open to any student as long as they are fully registered here at UC Berkeley, and as well as postdocs and visiting scholars, as long as they're not affiliated with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, just because they're considered Department of Energy employees. But in terms of eligibility, so it's open to anybody that is married or in a domestic partnership, that have not or don't have children living with them at least 50% of the time under the age of 18, as well as those that have, like, say, adult dependents as well, are more than welcome to live at University Village. And starting this year, as Michelle kind of mentioned, for West Village 2-bedroom, 1-bathrooms, we're running a pilot program where that it's not any couple that like has not reached like wanting to do, like, say, marriage or like a domestic partnership. So any couple in particular can take advantage and apply still for University Village as well, and live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and that's an option that they can choose. So who's not eligible? So unfortunately for our sake, us. So staff is not eligible to live in family housing, unfortunately, as well as say single graduates or reentry students. So if it's just like you're coming in as a graduate student, you're not in a domestic partnership, married, or coming in as a couple, you would not be eligible for family housing. However, we do have those wonderful 4 graduate communities that Michelle mentioned just a few minutes ago. But as well as lastly, students with less than 6 months left on their programs. So if you're graduating in, say, like spring or summer, obviously not this year, but next year, or in this case, you would not be eligible to reside in University Village, unfortunately. Couples pilot program. We're really wanting to press this because it's been very important. It's been many months and days of working to put this together. So, but we really want to hammer this home, just so this is something new that we're doing. Just starting for this year, we're running a pilot program that for 2-bedroom and 1-bathroom apartments in the West Village. It's open to UVA couples, so that aren't say haven't formalized their relationship, so like in the sense of like a domestic partnership or a marriage certificate, they can take advantage of this. It's not open to like, there's no need to be married or in domestic partnership or to have children, but at least one of the members of the couple has to be a UC Berkeley graduate student. And then for the application process for graduate housing and family housing both, our application process is quite simple. So go to portal.housing.berkeley.edu. You'll log in with your CalNet credentials. And when you log in, your classification gets pulled from CalCentral. And you'll see your graduate housing application as well as the family housing application. Applications opened on February 18th. And they will stay open. They're open until the 26-27 academic year. Applications open next year. So we always recommend applying sooner rather than later. But of course, there's not right away. It doesn't have to be done right this second. Here's some key takeaways from us. There's a lot of personal and academic benefits to living on campus in an on-campus community. There's full-time registered graduate students can apply as soon as they've accepted their offer of admission and obtained your CalNet credentials. Certain cohorts, as Michelle kind of touched base upon, receive priority in specific locations. So, for example, first-year law students in Manville, or Chancellor's Fellows in Jackson House Optometry and Intersection, or Natural Resources College for Uchi and Rued. Housing agreements are all 12 months for SSA. Early cancellations are not guaranteed. However, we'll do our best to find a replacement. So if you need to move out earlier, we'll do our best to try to find you a replacement so we can accommodate that. Family housing is month to month, as mentioned. Non-students are not eligible for on-campus housing, unfortunately. And of course, lastly, if you have any questions or concerns at all, Elda, Debbie, myself, or Michelle, please give us a call or send us an email at graduatestudenthousing@berkeley.edu or at APTS. We'll be more than happy to help, and we'll answer your questions any way we can. And then we also have a virtual tour on our website at housing.berkeley.edu. And then last, go Bears.
That is all of our contact info. And we highly recommend, reach out to us with your questions, but also visit our website. That is going to be your biggest resource, right? That's where you're going to find the rates for next year. That's where you're going to be able to do the virtual tour, check out the spaces, and kind of see what might speak to you. But again, feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you so much, Clayton and Michelle. Really appreciate that. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about some off-campus housing options now. So if for whatever reason campus housing isn't the direction you take, there are other options. So first we're going to go through some alternative housing, so not your traditional apartments, but some other options that are available. So we can go to the next slide. So the first one we're going to talk about is International House. So that's located on campus. It's up on I always want to say the north side because it's uphill, and I think in my brain uphill means north, but it's not. It's on the east side of campus. And it's a community that's open to both international and non-international students, but right now about 80% of students who live there are international students, and about 55% of students who live there are graduate students. The undergraduates who live there are junior or seniors, so they do tend to be a little bit older. And also postdocs can live there as well. One of the benefits of living there is it's very much a community-oriented space, and meals are provided, but it's not campus housing, but it is strongly affiliated with UC Berkeley students. And the next slide. Another option for some more non-traditional housing are co-ops. So if you've never heard of a co-op before, never lived in a co-op before, Usually how it works is you are putting in some kind of work into communal care for the space in order to offset the cost of rent. So at the Berkeley co-ops, that work shift is about 5 hours per week, and that's cleaning communal areas like communal living areas, cooking for everyone who lives there, things like that. So again, this is something that it is not a campus program, but there are a lot of UC Berkeley students who utilize the co-ops. So there are 17 houses and there are 3 apartments. Mostly these are shared bedrooms, and there are some single occupancy rooms available, but those tend to be in much higher demand. So the houses have food included as part of your rent in the fall and the spring. And some houses also in the summer, but at least during the academic year, the apartments don't. And they also have some accessible housing options available. So if that's a concern, that is an option. You do need to be a member to apply, and you can apply on their website. But this does tend to be sometimes a more cost-effective option for some of our students. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's definitely also another option. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about is the off-campus housing market. So how to navigate it, we're going to talk about some considerations and some thoughts to go into your housing search with, especially if you're choosing to live off-campus. And then going into things like transportation, some tips for your housing search. We're going to look through a few of the local neighborhoods around the Bay Area. Specifically close to Berkeley, but also around the Bay Area as well. And then we're going to go through some just general tips for your search and how to actually secure off-campus housing and what that process looks like. So next slide. Yeah, so the first things that you want to think about, the very first thing that you want to think about when you're looking at housing is what your budget is, and realistically what you're going to be able to afford. Also keeping in mind that depending on the kind of space that you're planning on living in, sometimes apartments do have income requirements. Oftentimes that's 2.5. That requirement is that you make 2.5 to 3 times rent or have a cosigner. Occasionally, if you're subletting from someone, those kinds of things might be more in flux, but just to be aware that that's something that you need to watch out for. Within that budget, then figuring out what your top priorities are. So your desired living situation. So if you want, a studio, a 1-bedroom apartment, or a bedroom in a shared apartment or house, you want to figure out your commute. There are sometimes students can find cheaper housing available a little bit farther from campus, depending. But then you have to factor in the cost of the commute and how far you're willing to commute. So that's something else that's really important to consider. And then accessibility, just want to mention that one of the things that I love about the Bay Area is that there's so many really cool old buildings. However, not all of them have elevators, or sometimes they, and just being aware of those accessibility things. The newer buildings that are being built in the Bay Area are much more accessible, so just taking that into consideration. So when looking at that budget, thinking about what those top priorities are for you. So if that top priority is, say it's really, really important for you to have in-unit laundry, that would be that would likely be a more expensive place to live. And so maybe depending on budget, you might be looking more at a bedroom in a shared apartment or house rather than your own 1-bedroom apartment. So just figuring out what are your own priorities, figuring out your hard budget, where you'd like to stay, and then also figuring out your priorities within that are really important when you're looking at this. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So transportation. So we have students that our graduate students live all across the Bay Area. So there's a lot of different ways to commute, a lot of different ways to come into campus. So one of them is Amtrak or Caltrains. So you can take the train into campus. That is really an option. BART is really popular, so it's the Bay Area Rapid Transit. There is a station in downtown Berkeley, so near campus, so a lot of students will take BART in. a lot of staff will take part in as well. There's also the AC transit system. So that's the Alameda and Contra Costa County bus system. As students, you do get free access to use the bus system in Alameda and Contra Costa County. So that's a really good perk. Helpful to look at where those lines lie within where you're planning to live. Also, a lot of the area is very walkable, very bikeable. So that's an important consideration when you're figuring out where you're going to live. If you're planning, again, to walk to campus, to bike to campus, or even just how walkable or bikeable the community is. If you aren't bringing a car. If you are bringing a car, just be aware that a lot of apartment complexes in the area have additional parking fees. So they may have rent as one set price. And then if you are going to be parking a car in their garage, that might be an additional charge. And that amount can really, really range. I've seen it as low as $25. I've seen it as much as $300. So it's really going to vary based on your place. So it's definitely something that you want to ask if you're planning on bringing a car to wherever you live. All right, next slide. So a few tips. So I say plan to secure housing 30 days prior. Let me clarify what I mean by that. I don't mean 30 days before school starts that you start looking for housing. What I mean by that is a lot of times housing will come on market 30 days before it's available. So today being February 27th, oftentimes what will come on market now is units that will start becoming available March 27th. So just bear that in mind. That's not to say that you have to move in March 27th. Often you can adjust that move-in date, but just keep that in mind as you're looking at apartments. As early as you want, it's a really good idea to do a preliminary search to get a feel for what kind of options are available, and what neighborhoods are like, so you can figure out what's realistic for you in terms of that list of priorities. Figuring out, if you can afford a place with an in-unit washer dryer, what kind of bedroom space, those kinds of things. And also figuring out what neighborhoods you like, what neighborhoods you are comfortable with the vibe with, what neighborhoods are close to BART, if that's how you're planning on commuting, things like that. And then also just being aware that, just like humans on social media, we're going to put our best face forward. Same thing with apartments, they're going to put their best pictures forward. So if at all possible, it's always best to tour an apartment, an off-campus apartment in person. I know that that's not really an option for a lot of people. Occasionally, in the past few years, it's become more popular for apartment complexes to do Zoom tours. So if you can't come in person, sometimes you'll be able to get on Zoom or FaceTime or something like that, and the leasing agent will walk you around. That is preferable. And sometimes neither of those things are available, and you just have to kind of use your best judgment. But as much as possible, it's always best to be able to come in person so you can get a vibe for the neighborhood, those kinds of things. But I think the overall tip is do your research and try to find a place that feels comfortable for you. All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so next we're going to talk through some of the neighborhoods surrounding Berkeley and some of the areas where it's popular for our graduate students to live. This particular guide was created by the Berkeley Law School. So you can see Berkeley Law, their building is specifically pinpointed on this map. But that gray area in the middle to the right of the guide is the UC Berkeley campus in general. So your department may not be right on that little pin, and yes, unless you're a law student, but we'll talk through a few of these surrounding neighborhoods. So next slide. So the first one we're going to talk about is Berkeley Hills. So Berkeley Hills are on the hills above campus. If you love nature, it's absolutely beautiful up there. There's a lot of good hikes, walks, things like that. Very steep hills. It's not close to any kind of shops or things like that. So a car is an absolute must if you're going to live up there. It can definitely be one of the more expensive areas in Berkeley because of those views and because of its proximity to nature. And there aren't typically apartments up there. It's typically more of houses available for rent or in-law suites or a room or something like that. But it's about a 10 to 15 minute drive to campus from up that way. We'll go to the next slide. So North Berkeley. So this is a really popular area close to campus. There's a lot of shops and public transportation. There's a North Berkeley BART station up there. It does tend to be the quieter side of campus. We'll talk about South Side in a minute, but South Side does tend to be a lot noisier. So this is very close to campus while still being loud. I apologize if, speaking of noise, if you can hear a lot of background sound. I am in a Sproul Hall, which is close to where all of the events happen on campus, and I hear someone with a microphone. So if apologize for the background sound. All right, and next slide. Okay, so South Side. So South Side is close to campus. It is relatively modest rent rates compared to a lot of the area of Berkeley. A lot of undergraduates live here. I think that this is also where a lot of the fraternities and sororities are located, so it can tend to get pretty busy. It also encompasses Telegraph Avenue, which is a really popular place for students to go get food. So if you like that, like hustle and bustle, that can be a good place to live. There's both houses, there's apartments here, and it's a really close walk into campus, about 10 to 15 or 5 to 10 minutes, excuse me. And next slide. So a little bit below that, South Berkeley tends to be the most affordable area in Berkeley. There's a lot of cafes, antique shops, and the Ashby BART station is located in South Berkeley. So that's, if you're planning on using BART, that's probably your closest station. And depending on where you live in South Berkeley, it's like a 15 to 25 minute walk or 10 to 15 minute bike ride. Okay, moving into West Berkeley. So this encompasses also the downtown Berkeley area. You can see right next to it. It's just a few blocks west of campus. It's near the downtown Berkeley BART station. Easy name to remember. There's also a lot of shops, restaurants, especially on Shattuck Avenue is the main street there. And this is over towards, if you remember, I don't know how much we're paying attention, but the Manville campus apartments are over this direction. It's about a 25-minute walk, 15-minute bike ride, or 10 to 15-minute bus, depending again on how far into West Berkeley you live. Okay, moving out of the city, going a little bit north, so into Albany, there's also lots of shops, restaurants, and bookstores. This is also where, again, referring back to the campus housing, this is where the family housing, UVA and Huchun Ruai are located in Albany. The nearest BART station here is in El Cerrito, but a lot of Albany is within walking or biking distance from that BART station. And again, there's a lot of houses and apartment complexes here, and you can see the commute gets a little bit farther. Because we're moving out of the city, it does tend, or the city of Berkeley, it does tend to get a little bit cheaper the farther away from Berkeley that you go. Next slide. So El Cerrito, north of Albany. Again, similarly, because it is farther from campus, it does tend to get a little bit more affordable. There are 2 BART stations in El Cerrito. There's the El Cerrito Plaza BART and the Del Norte BART. So your commute time, if you're planning on taking BART, depends on which one you're closer to. It's about a 10-minute BART ride from the Plaza BART and about 20-minute from the Del Norte. And again, 25 to 30-minute drive, 40-minute bike. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Okay. We also have a lot of graduate students who choose to live in Oakland. There are a lot of neighborhoods in Oakland. We're going to go through just a few of them. But again, a lot of the neighborhoods in Oakland tend to have a very different vibe, neighborhood to neighborhood. So if you're interested, just do your research, see what the area is. So Rockridge is the northernmost point of Oakland. As you can see, it's right on that border into Berkeley, excuse me. There's a BART station located here, the Rockridge BART line. Because of its proximity to Berkeley, rent here is more expensive than a lot of other neighborhoods in Oakland, but it is very close to Berkeley. And again, there's houses and apartments available here, and you can see those commute times. We go to the next slide. A few other areas are Piedmont Avenue and Lake Merritt. They're approximately 5 miles from campus. It's hard because I'm talking about both of them in the same slide. Because of the distance from campus and the higher like urban density, housing tends to be a little bit more plentiful and less expensive out this way. And these apartment complexes, a lot of times the apartment complexes in Berkeley tend to be a little bit smaller, and the apartment complexes out here are those can be those huge apartment complexes. So there's houses, there's duplexes, there's apartments, and the commute time varies. And one of the things that's important, I should also say, when planning your commute, is again looking at how far you are. So for example, there is a BART station in Lake Merritt. But it is on the far west side of the lake. So if you get an apartment on the far east side of the lake, that can be a bit of a long bike ride, a long walk, something like that. So just if that's how you're planning on getting to campus, making sure you look at those things. Or taking the bus, but just making sure you plan what your route is going to look like. San Francisco. We have a lot of graduate students who choose to live in San Francisco. The advantages are you're living in the heart of the city and you're near a wide variety of cultural events. This can vary. San Francisco itself also has a lot of neighborhoods that have a lot of different personalities. So again, if that's where you choose to live, finding the one that fits best with your needs. The commute time can be about a 45 to 60-minute drive. There will be a toll on the Bay Bridge. I think it's about $7 off the top of my head, or about a 30 to 45-minute BART, again, depending on which station you're coming from. And there's a lot of other nearby communities that is not meant to be exclusive. Like I said, we have graduate students that live all across the Bay Area. So a couple other options. Kensington is right near Berkeley Hills. It has a very similar vibe. Emeryville, that is where the campus intersection apartments are located, and there are other apartment complexes there as well. Alameda, it's an island right off the coast of Oakland. That could be another great place to live. Walnut Creek is to the east. It's a little bit more suburban out there. So if that's more your vibe, if that's more where you'd like to live, that can be an option as well. And Lafayette is on the way out to Walnut Creek, but isn't quite out that far. But just a few options for some locations to start your housing search in. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so where to look for apartments? So there's a lot of options available. So the first one that I want to talk about is Cal Rentals. So this is available as an off-campus housing rental services. So this is run through campus housing. Elaine Perkins can't be here today, but she does Cal Rentals. And this is a housing portal that is run through the university and has a lot of housing that's nearby campus. They also have a roommate search tool that you're able to connect with other UC Berkeley students specifically to try to find roommates that way. Again, apartments.com, things like Craigslist, Zillow, all of those things. And again, on that roommate search tool, I've listed a lot of options for Facebook groups where you can connect with other people in the area looking for housing. I think we're about to get into it, but I also want to say when we're looking at housing at places like Craigslist, Facebook, those kinds of things, we want to be careful to protect ourselves. So we're going to go through some tips also of how to do that. So next, yes. So some red flags to watch out for when you're looking for off-campus housing, especially those, less verified sites. So some things you want to watch out for is unusually high deposits. So be aware of we'll go through what deposit limits can be, but if you see something past that, that's definitely going to be a red flag and maybe not an apartment that you want to try to go for. Want to be aware of any requests to send money via wire transfer or Western Union. When you're sending money, you want to make sure you know who you're sending it to. So sending that with a check, a cashier's check, or a money order. And if you are using a mail service, use a trackable mail service. You also want to watch out for, it's not a good idea to send money prior to signing a housing contract or prior to having some documentation. There can sometimes be holding fees, and we'll talk about that. But you want to have some kind of documentation of what the money is being sent for and things like that. Another red flag to watch out for, and this one like hurts me, but rent offered significantly below market value. So sometimes, you can stumble across something that just seems like it's too good to be true. Sometimes that means that it is. That's not to say that you can't find a good deal. You definitely can. But you just want to be really, really aware of those red flags, and really, really aware that when people are potentially trying to take advantage of you, again, on those websites that might not be as verified, that is one of the things that they'll use to reel people in. You also want to be aware of listings that utilize third-party services. It's kind of best to be communicating with the leasing office directly, and also be aware of dramatic landlord stories. So these are things like a landlord may come up with a very fantastical story of why you need to send the money absolutely today, because they're having this issue with their family member and blah, blah, blah. Like those are things that you probably want to watch out for. I also want to say that these tips on red flags and things like that are coming from Student Legal Services, which is a campus program that is available to all students. But one of the things that they do is they handle a lot of tenants' rights issues and tenant landlord disputes. So they have a lot of information on their website about things to watch out for when signing a housing contract, and how to go through that process safely. So definitely another resource to check out if you are at all concerned. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so when you are working on finding an off-campus apartment, you definitely want to make sure that you are asking a lot of questions, especially if you can't come in person. Ask any question that you have. So like some examples of good questions might be, how are utilities billed? Finding out if those are included in rent or paid separately. If you're planning on bringing a car, finding out if your parking spot is assigned and how much does parking cost. Figuring out with maintenance things. Is maintenance on site? How long does it typically take for maintenance concerns to be addressed? Will maintenance concerns be addressed over the weekend? Is there an emergency line for, say, a pipe burst in the middle of the night, which hopefully that doesn't happen to anyone? Who do you call? What do you do? Finding out if there are any fees to breaking your lease early. If you're bringing a pet, are there any breed restrictions? Are you allowed to bring a pet? And then you can ask questions about the general vibe of the neighborhood too. You can ask if it's on a busy street, just any questions you can think of. You are definitely welcome to ask your leasing agent. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but just an example of some very normal questions to bring up to the leasing office as you're going through your housing search. Okay, so we've gone through this process. You found a neighborhood you want to live in. You found an apartment you want to live in. It's affordable. It's in your budget. It's a great deal. You have roommates that you like. Now what? So next slide. So this is kind of what to expect as we're going forward. So the first thing is that a holding deposit. So some landlords may request a holding deposit. If they request a holding deposit, if the landlord then rents it to someone else, you're entitled to your holding deposit back. If you pay your holding deposit, that holding deposit typically then goes towards your security deposit or towards your first month's rent. Next slide. The next step is going to be a credit check or and sometimes like an application fee mixed into that. So this was, as of late 2023, it was up to $63.70, was the absolute maximum you could be charged for this. So this is something else to keep an eye on for those red flags, just like knowing how much is normative to pay. The next step, like I mentioned, a lot of times apartment complexes are going to ask for you to prove your income. So those are pay stub. You can prove your income through pay stubs, letters from employers, financial aid letters, funding letters, or a cosigner. So any of those options. Next slide. Often you're going to have to pay a security deposit. Your security deposit cannot be deemed non-refundable. That doesn't mean that they have to refund it to you if things happen, if you damage the apartment, but it cannot be deemed non-refundable up front. The maximum is 2 times rent for an unfurnished apartment and 3 times rent for a furnished apartment. And your security deposit can be used for things like unpaid rent, wear and tear, and cleaning of the premises. Next slide. I'm going to go through the rest of this pretty quickly so we make sure we have time to get to questions. But when you're looking at your rental agreement and lease, it can be so tempting sometimes to just go ahead and sign it. But it's really important that you look through it. There's a lot of really important information in there, including, again, the duration and term of your lease, how much your rent is going to be, security deposit, the number of people that are in the unit, promises made by the landlord, whether or not pets are allowed, the subletting, your subletting rights, and how utilities are paid are all going to be within that lease. When you get in the apartment, it's really important that you do a walkthrough of it and you document all previous damage to an apartment so that you don't have to end up paying for something that you didn't harm. Some apartments will have this as a formalized process that are due within a few days of move-ins, and sometimes you'll want to be able to you'll want to be documenting that on your own. Next slide. With roommates, if you're living with roommates, it's best to plan for the unexpected. So like I said, Student Legal Services has some information, put a website there, has some information available for if you are living off campus and things go wrong with your roommates, you have a roommate that skips on rent, things like that. Just go through some options that you have available for you. Next slide. I think this is my last thing, renter's insurance. Even if your apartment does not require renter's insurance, it is a good idea to have renter's insurance. Hopefully you don't need it. Hopefully your time living in the Bay Area is completely peaceful and nothing ever happens, but just in case of those emergencies, it's really important to have. And again, few resources. So Student Legal Services, like I said, has a lot of information on that. The Basic Needs Center has a housing guide. A lot of this information was also pulled from their housing search guide. Berkeley off-campus rental services also. And then if you need to get in contact with me, if you have any questions for me specifically, you can reach out to me through that email on the bottom, gradhousingBasicNeeds@berkeley.edu. And then I think we have a few minutes for any questions.
Yes, thank you for, thank you. No, yeah, we've seen a bunch of questions come through, and I think, well, I think we have enough time for just a few, but one of a theme on here that I see is also around how competitive is on-campus housing, and if there's any advice in terms of when to start approaching or looking into housing. As well as, is there any additional resources that you can provide regarding accommodations if needed?
Yes, I think we were trying to power through the questions, so we may have answered those. So for us, for on-campus housing, our recommendation is always, and Debbie, you can totally chime in too, because I know you've been doing this for a while, but our recommendation is as soon as you have accepted your admission and you have your CalNet credentials, just get in there and submit that application for on-campus housing. And And for accommodations, students would go through, we do have an accommodations team. And so there is a process where students can submit an ADA housing accommodations request form, and that you can do that on our housing online and through our housing portal. And so you'll submit that paperwork, that form, and then someone from the accommodations team will reach out. You also will submit any medical documentation that supports the request, and then that gets reviewed by the team, and our housing accommodations folks will reach out to you if there is any additional information that is needed, or they'll let you know, what accommodations, what housing we have that might meet your accommodation and provide you an offer that way.
There's also a question on here that it says, having a sense of community in my neighborhood is very important to me. How can I take this into consideration or research this as I consider off-campus housing options?
That's a really good question. I think one of the things that I appreciate is I feel like there's a lot going on in the Bay Area. There's a lot of activities in general. So it also depends on what kind of things that you're into. So for example, you can live really closely to a lot of museums and things like that. The Oakland Museum of California is really really close to Lake Merritt. For example, a lot of times local libraries have a lot of community events. I think in general it depends. Again, for example, if you're really into sports, if you're really into baseball and you're looking into living in San Francisco, maybe living near the Giants Stadium might be something that you're into. I think that the communities around the Bay differ so much. And so looking into the kind of activities and kind of events that you would envision yourself doing in the Bay outside of your time as a student, and then looking into where you could live to be conveniently located to those events might be a good way to go about it.
Thank you. And I think we will start to wrap up our webinar. We do have a few minutes left, and I do still see that there's still many questions that are coming in, and I do want to say let's see. Mariela, if you can pull up the slide on our contact page, I think we will again start wrapping up, and I do want to say that for those of you who weren't able to get your questions answered, I do want to say that you can please contact our Office for Graduate Diversity, as well as and we'll provide the link to the Diversity and Community Fellows if you also want to get perspective from students. Again, if this session is being recorded and will be available and shared after editing for accessibility. And I just want to say thank you to our panelists for joining us today and giving us all this valuable information, as well as our ASL interpreters. And I want to say thank you. And we still have one more day of Belong at Berkeley webinars. So we hope to see you there. But thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.